I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 6:01 p.m. And note that this meeting is being recorded, and if anyone is intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting, please notify me at this time. Our first order of business is to adjourn to executive session.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to MGL C30A Section 21A3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for contract negotiations and Halifax Teachers Association and Halifax Teachers Association, as well as executive session pursuant to MGL C30A S21A7 to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, approval of executive session minutes of October 7th, 2024.
I second.
Thank you. Katie?
Aye.
Roll call vote. Lori?
Aye.
And myself is an aye. I'm sorry, there's stuff we have to do before we can continue with the regular session, but it shouldn't be long, so we can let you know when we're ready to go back into regular session. All right, so now I'm opening our sorry, are you recording now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll open our meeting again at 6:18 p.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our visitors. Would either of you like to speak? Okay, well, welcome. Now we'll review and vote the regular minutes of October 7th.
I have one adjustment I was hoping you could make.
Okay.
In the section where we talked about the regional school district discussion of full regionalization, there's one, so the third paragraph, it says a discussion of changing the start time of the high school and elementary schools. That I was just making a comparison that we've gone back and forth on that. That really wasn't part of the discussion, so we could take that whole sentence out. I just don't want it to get out there like, oh, we're gonna be changing school times again, and yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, we don't
I
need to
think
start
I
panicking.
can edit Sue's minutes. I can do that. No problem.
Awesome,
Okay.
awesome, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from October 7th, 2024 with the updates Lori proposed to the language about school start times.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Katie?
I'm going to abstain. I was absent from this meeting.
Okay, Lori?
Aye.
And myself is a yes. Okay, now we have the HTA MOU and possible vote. Should I let Liz?
I'm happy to present.
Okay, sure.
An educator at Halifax Elementary School who would like to be honored for her retirement at the end of the school year, and she's looking for your support.
Okay. I will make a motion to honor the retirement at the end of the school year.
I'll
as
second.
presented. Okay, we'll have a vote. Sorry, Katie,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
and myself is a yes.
Thank you.
And Liz again, our Halifax cafeteria substitute rate.
Great, thanks so much. Currently, the cafeteria substitutes here are paid less than both Kingston and Silver Lake. They're paid $16.15 per hour, and there's a proposal for them to be compensated at the same rate, which is $17.53, which is a change of $1.38 per hour. The funding would come from the cafeteria revolving account, which is the Halifax School Lunch Revolving Fund, so there's no impact on the budget. And just for numbers, there's a small amount of cafeteria substitutes. It's not something that happens regularly, but it would be it's important for Halifax so that they can be competitive with our surrounding districts, which happen to also
Be in our district.
their own districts as well. So that is the ask, and just so that it's totally transparent, the request would be for the beginning of the school year for it to be retroactive if so
Okay.
approved.
Okay.
And there's no concern from the cafeteria manager that going back to the beginning of the school year, there's no issue for them financially?
No, great question. Megan actually couldn't be here tonight, but said if it was appropriate to call or text her if you had any questions that I couldn't answer. But she and I worked on this together. She is very good about keeping track of the numbers and knowing that that revolving account can only have a maximum of 3 months money in it, but feels very confident that this is sustainable as well.
Great.
That's good, and also, with our desires to sort of make things more uniform across the district, I think it's a good idea, personally.
I would agree. I've always been bothered that our towns within our own district have paid different amounts, so I think this is a good step.
Anyone want,
I'll make a motion to accept the change of pay rate for substitute cafeteria workers in Halifax.
And I'll make a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Yes, got it.
Thank you.
School Resource Officer, SRO, and MOU.
So in your packets tonight, you will see a draft MOU, which has been presented by the chief. It was updated. It's basically the same agreement as last year, but with updates to personnel and information, contact information, for example. What I'm looking for tonight is your approval so that Lauren may sign on behalf of the committee to formally enter an agreement with the Halifax Police Department.
Is this basically because we changed who the SRO is, generally speaking, or are there other changes?
Every year, we should update our agreement, because sometimes there are bigger changes,
Okay,
but generally speaking, we try to update them annually.
okay.
And I noticed the assistant principal, new assistant principal is listed as a
Oh,
contact.
that makes
Yep.
sense,
So,
okay.
I
Yeah, I
have-
looked it over, but.
Yeah, I have a question. So I tried to look through this as quick or as comprehensively as I could, because it's a lot. Do we have hours that the school resource officer is available? Are they generally available throughout the school day, or is there a number of days that they're available? Maybe that's in here, but I didn't see that.
So, the agreement is for the year, but the actual hours are not part of the agreement. Principal Beaudry may be able to speak to the hours of the current SRO.
Well, they're definitely available whenever we contact them, so whenever we call them in, they come right over and send someone over, or he comes over himself. And then he's typically there in the morning times at bus arrival, and then at dismissal, and at any type of major events that we have, like when we have the turkey trot, things like
Okay.
that, or field day.
And it's the same person, or is it, like?
If he's on and he's there, he's been the guy that showed up.
Okay,
I thought it was between 10 and 12 hours, but I think, today he brought in Roxy with Officer Campbell today, so he just popped in for a couple hours.
okay.
But I
So-
think he does that above and beyond.
Okay, so the shift that he worked as a police officer coincides with the school hours?
Yes.
That's kind of what I was,
Yep.
Right, because I know we
Getting
had a situation
Yeah.
where someone was on the night shift. that-
okay, that's great,
Yep.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion?
no.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the School Resource Officer MOU as presented.
No, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, full regionalization discussion.
So in our last meeting, I was asked to look into alternatives in the event that the town did not receive the grant to look into full regionalization. We have spoken with the town manager, who has applied for the grant, has been in communication with the grant department at DESI, speaking to the interest of both Kingston, Halifax, and Silver Lake in terms of looking into the pros and cons of full regionalization. What you have in your packet is a proposal from NESDEC, and what I would ask you to do, it gives you a brief outline of what they would look for, what they would be looking for in this efficiency study. One of the things that Sarah and I discussed was the fact that the qualifications of the NASDAQ people are wonderful, they're great, but we would probably like to see this bolstered by someone with some business and accounting background as well, because we know that that's a big part of this consideration. So NASDAQ will update and change or add anything that we may want them to do. It's 13 pages long, so perhaps for our next meeting, if there's anything that, or in between meetings, if there's something you would like for me to ask them to include, if you could please send it to me, and then I will see what they can do to answer those questions or provide that additional service if we decide to go in this direction. Even if the town gets the grant, I have shared this with the town administrator as well, because the town administrator and we will be looking at a number of different possible options of how to use that money, and we may contract with a group like this anyway.
And when would we be notified if we were granted the grant?
That can vary. I would typically, I think last year it was January they found out. If I recall correctly, it felt like during the budget season we found out that they had not been approved.
Because I noticed that this quote is only effective until February 15th of next year. So my concern is that the rate may go up after that date. As we've seen, most things these days keep increasing in cost.
So then for next, it will be January, are we meeting in December?
It'll be
January. So for January's meeting, we'll have to make some quick decisions.
Well, and we have a joint meeting too, right, where we can discuss possibly options for this as well. Like I would like to bring up possibly splitting the cost with Kingston Stanley.
Well, that was gonna be my next question. Did Kingston apply for the grant as well, or are we doing it on behalf of the district?
Halifax is doing it on behalf of both Halifax and Kingston. Last year, Kingston applied on behalf of both Kingston and Halifax, so.
Okay.
The thing I would like is, I agree with the accounting experience, if you could ask them more about that.
Yep.
Because that's one of our big concerns.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard to imagine that it would be more expensive to read in lines, but you never know, right? Until you do the study. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So there's nothing to vote on really, so just find
No.
out, okay. And I guess we could email you if we have any other questions we think of between now and the next meeting.
Thank you for doing the work.
Oh, no
Yes,
problem.
thank you. Okay, approval of bill schedule.
So our meetings are currently out of sync with the warrant cycle. There was a single signature warrant on November 4th for $142,741.31. There was also a single signature warrant for prior year bills on October 30th for $17,880.06. I'll speak to that further in the financial report. The next warrant will come out as a single signature warrant on December 2nd.
Okay, thank you. School correspondence and reports. I don't think I have anything for that. New business. Future agenda items, is there anything?
I don't think so. I did have a question about something we discussed related to special town meeting, but I don't know where to bring that up in our meeting. At last month's meeting.
Probably, because it's to do with the boilers, right?
Yeah.
When would be
Maybe-
the best time to discuss that? Probably during, yeah, probably during finance, I would say.
Okay.
Okay. And then subcommittees, policy, I don't think met, negotiations, I don't they met.
No. Policy, we're waiting for a date. We had been waiting on the Title IX
All right,
policy, and now we're just waiting for possible dates from the policy subcommittee chair.
okay. And then negotiations, we didn't have any. Pilgrim Area Collaborative,
So, the board met on November 7th, I'm cheating on my phone because this is a lot to remember. There were a few items that were reviewed. The biggest was the auditor's report for the fiscal year 2024, so last year. It was a very comprehensive report about many aspects of the collaborative. It was in draft form. They were waiting for a couple of updates, so we reviewed it and voted on it in draft form because we wouldn't be meeting again until after it was due. There was also, well, let's go to this first. There were also a couple of personnel changes. Jason Nolly, who was a nurse, resigned for November 15th, and there were 4 new hires: Christina Hutchinson, an ESP for Silver Lake, Eric Keith, ESP for Pilgrim Academy, Sophia McEllarney, ESP for Pilgrim Academy, and Daniel McMahon, ESP for Pilgrim Academy. And then the last thing, which Sarah, you may already be in the loop on this, I'm not sure. But they, after closing out the year for 23-24, they gave an accounting of member town credits that the towns would be receiving back. And so Halifax will be receiving $11,374 as a town credit. However, that money will most likely go to Silver Lake to be accounted. I think this is, I may be getting it wrong, because our funding changed last year when we realigned the district. Sarah will get a accounting of all the 3 towns in the district and assign that accordingly to certain students, if I'm understanding that correctly. Does that sound like Greek to you?
It does, and let me give you the answer that you're looking for.
Thank you.
We have a choice of receiving a credit
Yes.
in the amount that you stated towards a tuition for a Halifax student, or receiving a reimbursement check. We have chosen to take the tuition credit.
Thank you for clarifying that, because now that you say that, I do remember that being discussed. So, thank you. And that's all the updates that I have.
okay. Youth and Rec?
Hold on a second.
Sure.
Okay. Lots of stuff going on with Town Rec. December 7th, from 6:30 to 9:30, grades 5 and 6 will have a social here. There'll be games and a raffle, cash concession stands. Students do need a permission slip, and there's a $10 entry fee. December 14th at 5 p.m. starts Holidays in Halifax. Here at the elementary school in the parking lot, there'll be plenty of food trucks. In the all-purpose room, a craft fair, and in the gym, kids' activities. There will be no fireworks this year. The walking track has been refurbished, and it came out great. 4 after-school programs are going strong. They're currently trying to clean out the Gaga pit by the playground. It's been roped off in the meantime for safety purposes. Unfortunately, it was vandalized when somebody broke neon lights within the sand, and so it needs to get cleaned up before students can play in it again. We're getting ready for basketball season, and with that, the gym will be used 7 days a week. And a huge thank you goes out from the Town Rec to Bob Clancy, the after-school teachers, and Mr. Beaudry for all of the help and cooperation. And Mr. Steele says, "Go team."
Thank you. I have the PTO update from Karen. They had a meeting on November 12th, and they are officially a not-for-profit organization now.
Awesome.
I know that's been talked about for a long time. So they talked about the Wizards. That was last Monday night, the Harlem Wizards, which was a great activity. I was able to go to that. a great community building activity. It was awesome. Lots of people there. I guess they're wanting to do teacher appreciation monthly. It sounds like there's a crumble cookie fundraiser. People are picking up the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And for student appreciation, they discussed monthly class awards. And the Mingle and Jingle as part of holidays in Halifax will be on 12/14 as well, 9 to 11. No raffles this year, and a Polar pop-up store and photos of Mr. and Mrs. Claus. And it's more of a focus on community engagement as opposed to a fundraiser. And they're trying to revive Art to Remember. It's put on hold for this year. The Halloween social was a success. The book fair had about a $2,500 profit. The treasurer report said they have about $65,000 in their accounts. So that was the update.
Can I ask, now that we're on PTO, if we were able to clarify the funds that they were gonna be donating? I know some of it we were able to accept.
Right.
Did the other part of that get settled?
My understanding is there was going to be a discussion between Mr. Beaudry and the PTO about other possible
We
Wait.
did, we met, but there's still a lot of questions up in the air, so
Okay.
nothing's been finalized yet.
Okay.
So, you can talk with Amy Peace and check on that.
All right, capital budget didn't meet. Admin review did meet.
Yeah. So admin review met several times, and through those meetings, it was recommended to renew the contract for Dr. Prue for 3 more years. Union 31 and Silver Lake voted to renew her contract, and congratulations goes to Dr. Prue for having that pass. And we're eager to see what you and your staff can do, new staff, because a lot of new faces, can do to improve student achievement and communication with the towns.
Thank you. And then did the EIV
We
subcommittee?
did not, Karen and I have not been able to connect, so hopefully we'll have an update for January.
Okay, great. Union 31 also met for the admin review and the contract. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Now I'll turn the time over to Mr. Beaudry for the principal's report.
School council, we had a meeting on the 20th. We were glad to announce that Officer Simpson has joined us as our community member, because that was the one spot that we were looking to hold. So he joined us and will be with the group for this year. And we had discussed finalizing our school improvement plan, and then we revisited our overhaul of the handbook. So that continues to be something that we're trying to streamline as well.
When do you think we will see the school improvement plan?
I
know we
can,
talked about last spring.
can I bring it next week, next meeting?
Yes,
Does that work?
yeah,
Okay. Would you like it beforehand?
yes, please. And also goals.
I'm sorry,
And goals,
goals?
yes.
Okay.
It would also be good to see data that goes along with your school improvement plan too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So I'll get into the NCAS presentation. You guys doing okay? All right.
Is there anything on the fire distribution?
No.
No
Okay,
I know.
sorry. Okay, just checking.
Okay. All right, so, I know this presentation has 42 slides on it. There's a lot of information there, so I'll pause after I get through the ELA section of that, or you
Just keep going.
keep going, keep going. We'll hold questions until the end, please. All right. So in the beginning here, we just have this is accountability information that just we share with everybody in terms of how the MCAS is reporting out. This is our accountability for Halifax in 2024. So not requiring assistance or intervention is our overall, and we had 57% substantial progress towards our targets. Here our overall school accountability percentile is at 71%. That was highest in the district, so we're pretty proud about that overall achievement.
I'll also point out that it's higher than it was in 2019.
Here, we just have just a review of the MCAS administration over the last 6-7 years, and from 2019 is where lots of us are comparing back to. There was nothing in 2020. 21 was a half test, and then after that, we went back to full tests, grade 3 through 8, and then in the high school as well. Statewide, this is just a kind of an overview. The ELA results show lower achievement in all grades from 2023. Math results showed improved achievement in third amongst relatively flat results in most grades, and then science results show improved achievement in grades 5 and 10, with lower achievement in grade 8. It's just important to note for us, our ELA overall was up 1%, our math was up 7%, and our science was up 13% from the previous year, just in general. So we're excited about those, but we still have room to grow, and we want to make sure that we keep moving that needle to try and get to our 70%. So ELA and math they were up 1 and 7, and they were both at 55% meeting or exceeding, and then our science was at 60% meeting and exceeding. This is just, the next few slides is just a dart comparison, and this is a tool that DESE uses where it compares Halifax Elementary to 10 other schools that are similar in enrollment and in low income, students with disabilities, and ELL. So this is just sorting this group here by our ELA scores, and compared to our group of schools, we were second on that list up there. It's just a good point to notice, because a lot of times we don't necessarily compare to Kingston or Clinton, or even to the state of Massachusetts. So these are schools that are similar, that we compare ourselves to. So in ELA, we were second on that list. In math, we were also second on the list. And in science, we were also second on the list. So we'd like to get it up there a little bit higher, but that's school and sandwich there is got a really good science score, but we're going to try and beat them out next year. But important to note, this is per pupil expenditure, so we spend far less per student than all of the other DART schools that we're compared to. So we're bottom on that list with an average per pupil expenditure of $13,419, where our group average is $17,000. And that school, Sandwich, which beat us out, they spend almost $22,000 per student.
And I'll just note that Sarah will be talking more about per pupil expenditures in her report.
So this is for ELA. This is an overview for the state of Massachusetts, where you can see compared to this column here is where we're compared for the state itself by grade level versus 2023, and then versus 2019. So you can see the state is still pretty far off of where they were in 2019, but also down pretty much in all grades versus 2023. This is overall here for Halifax. Like I said, mentioned earlier, we're up 1% from last year, from 54% to 55%. Still, back in 2021, we were at 61%, so we're not quite back to where we were, but
Where were we in 2019?
I don't have that one on.
I'm sorry, I'm supposed to wait.
I'll find it for you. But yeah, I probably assume it's probably a little bit higher than that 61, but I'll find that out for you. So this is averaging all grades 3 through 6 in Halifax. And then the next few slides, this is broken down by grade level. So this is 3rd grade. Currently they're up 14% over last year's cohort.
So this is, sorry, the grade 3 for the last, 2023, 2020, this isn't like following the cohort, so this is like
No.
third graders in 2021, third
Correct.
graders in 2022, okay, thank you.
This is current fourth grade, or fourth grade last year. They were up 2% over the previous year. And the state was down 3. That gives you perspective. This is a growth scale, and it goes from lighter green to darker green, or yellow down the end there. So obviously we want to see a higher growth on the dark green side as much as possible.
Ken, can you give us your average, your SGP for grade 4?
This here is at 54. So typically you'd like to see where the average in the 50 percentile is where you're typically looking.
So you
This is
don't
compared
include,
to
oh,
third
sorry.
grade. So it's third to fourth is the growth.
And the number of students included, is that the total grade, or is there a reason why students are excluded?
This one, I'd have to double check on the individuals, but it could have been students that maybe opted out or,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. There was 4, because this is more than 66.
There's no opt-outs? That's what I thought, there were no opt-outs.
Or students that
Didn't take the test?
didn't take the test.
Thank you.
Here's 5th grade. 5th grade was down 10 from the previous year. State was down 6 from the previous year.
So that was a greater decrease in the state.
However, the growth here was pretty decent, and the growth is at 55 for this particular grade. It was much more in the high to very high growth range. 6th grade was down 2%, from 57 to 55. And the state was down also 2%. Growth here, this was a higher growth rate, so the growth here was at 61. So even though they didn't achieve as much at that rate, but they did have a stronger growth rate than the other grades. These are just some pieces that here in ELA, the MCAS ELA standard analysis to identify curriculum strengths and areas for growth at each grade level. That's been a focused area for us on any of the PD days that we've had, and also at staff meetings and PLCs and data meetings. We're continuing with the Orton-Gillingham training for K-2 teachers for consistent phonics instruction, and addition of responsive teaching resources and strategies, and continue to differentiate instruction based on the individual needs of each student. That's for all ELA K-6. 3 through 6, we've had a particular focus here in writing in Halifax, but it's also, we're doing this starting district-wide, year 1 implementation of grade level writing benchmarks to assess narrative, informational, and opinion writing. There's district-wide consistency for writing in each grade level. That's been a focus on our PD days that we've had. MCAS writing analysis to identify areas of strength and areas of growth and idea development and writing conventions. Here in this building, we had a writing committee that worked vertically K through 6, where we're having shared common language and shared graphic organizers and shared rubrics. So there's been a little bit more consistency, and our writing scores have been definitely improving and on the higher end that we've been seeing, just basically from having that vertical team that we've had here. And there's one member from each grade level that meets. Revised scheduling to lengthen writing blocks, and PLC writing meetings to analyze student benchmark writing development and conventions. Collaborate with Brian DeSantis, our curriculum coordinator, to develop that. Going into math, as I said, math, we were up 7% overall from the previous year. This just does the statewide breakdown, where grade 3 was up, but in 23, but no one really is back to where they were in 2019. There was smaller increases in grade 4, and then from there on out, the other grades made slight declines. And like I mentioned, we're up 7. Back to 21, I'll find out the numbers on 2019. We're up 10% compared to 2021. Then this breaks it out by grade level. Our 3rd grade was up 19% over the previous year. Here's 4th grade, slight increase of 3%, where the state was up 1%. This is showing the growth. Growth here is a little on the lower end with 41% for our mean SGP. Our 5th grade was up 8%, which is at 59%. The state was actually down in 5th grade by 1%. Here we had a growth score of, the mean there is 68, which is great. It's a huge increase, so I feel like we're making good strides towards reaching that 70%. 6th grade was actually down 5%, and the state was also down, but only down 1%. And the growth score here was at 42. So again, a little under where we want it to be, but again, 50 is our target for our growth, but we're definitely trying to push that needle. And we're working with our teams to try to find out what exactly, where our strengths were and where our weaknesses were. So we've been having that time in data meetings and PLCs. Just kind of math in grades 3 through 6, just a glance. We have Envision K-5, Big Ideas in grade 6. Big Ideas is also in middle school. Math is up for a K-12 math program review right now. Ryan and a team are working on looking at the math program and what options, because Envision is phasing out. Digital classroom support, surveying teachers to identify our software program funding, to identify programs to continue and programs to change. There's different platforms that we've been using for a number of years, so it might be a good opportunity for us to kind of streamline the different platforms we do have. Benchmark data analysis, we have STAR math assessment in grades 1 through 6. We continue to utilize our data meetings, and we analyze our math data and student needs. Then we have our interventions that we work on, we revisit throughout the year, and we have intervention blocks in both ELA and math scheduled in the master, put into our master schedule for both subject areas. Then we're on science. Science in grade 5 was up 3 over 2023, but it was still down 4 compared to 2019. As I mentioned here in Halifax, we were up 13 compared for our grade 5 students. And we were up 13 we were at 48 last year, 61 the year before, or 61 this last year. In science, continuing to implement mystery science programs in K-5 and ensure that the grade level standards are being taught. We're also continuing with Open SciEd in grade 6. That's across the district. Consistency across grade levels. Teachers will collaborate to use the district scope and sequence. MCAS to inform teaching, continue to analyze, utilize MCAS questions in each grade level. And now with how we're departmentalizing 4, 5, and 6, we have our science teachers are much easier to collaborate as opposed to having self-contained teachers in those grade levels. And professional development training on the new SDE performance-based MCAS test starting in the spring of 2025. District-wide, these are some components here. RBT, training for district teachers, principals, and coordinators. OG, training for reading fluency. Multi-tiered systems of support is continuing. Every year it's an area that we try to tweak and focus on. That was our former child study, but now it's formalized and it's much more structured, so we can provide interventions for students, and then we're staffed to implement those interventions. The EduClimber platform helps us with tracking the data, and it pulls together all of the data platforms that we do have, so we really do have a lot of information on students, and we can track those students' information in there. Professional development that focuses on student performance data, grade level planning to write and read during social studies and science to supplement the ELA standards. Like I mentioned before, we're on year 1 of the math curriculum review, and we continue to assess our assessment benchmark implementation. We tweaked it again this year because last year we had added a 4th benchmark, which kind of threw us off a little bit, so we went back to our original assessment calendar that we had the year before, and then we also added in writing as one of our benchmarks that we hadn't had previous years. And implementing the new SEL Sabre screener, that's in place of the Panorama screener, SEL screener that we had prior to that. Ignore this one. This is by cohort that we had. So this is starting with ELA in the first column and the state. It's Halifax in the first column and then the state in the next column. And what we're doing is just comparing year to year, trying to follow those cohorts. So the current grade 4, that's where they were at this past year when they took the 3rd grade test. And current grade 5, those were their scores when they were in 4th and in 3rd, and then so on. So then giving you a glimpse into each of the cohorts. And then these last 2 columns here, the white column here is here in Halifax, what the cohort is, and then it's comparing that to the state. And then this last column is just the year that they actually took the test.
Is that, you have it for oh, okay, never mind. It's ELA and math right there, okay.
So one thing I noticed on this is that when it comes to ELA, our 3rd grade educators are doing a phenomenal job. They have the top scores every single year with ELA. My concern is that there is a dip after they leave 3rd grade. So what gaps do we need to be filling that they met in grade 3 but are no longer meeting after that point? In fact, in some of the grades, they never got back up to that same point. So that's a concern of mine. I don't know if possibly there can be some learning walks done and teachers watch 3rd grade and see what they're doing differently, what can be gained. Maybe it's a simple teaching strategy that can be implemented. Maybe it's a way that they're reviewing for MCAS itself, but something they're doing is working.
Absolutely. I mean, they definitely, that cohort just that we did have last year was just in ELA, they had kind of exceeded that target of 7%,
Right.
and they were pretty close in the math as well. So,
Having been on walkthroughs with Principal Beaudry in at Halifax Elementary School, One of the things that you'll notice in grade 3 is that they do an excellent job of differentiating and providing interventions in the classroom at all levels. So there's some small group instruction going on, there's intensive support going on, and there's whole group class instruction going on at different points within the lesson. They're also a team that I participated in their data team meeting, and they're very open and honest in terms of what's working and what's not, and what they might try differently. So they're a high-functioning team as well in terms of being able to look at the data in a way that is truly focused on how do we help students succeed and thrive, what do we need to do differently in order to help get them there, what have we tried, what didn't work, what did work. So there are a number of things that are going right in grade 3. In addition to that, all of our grade levels are looking at to what extent are we aligned, and not just teaching topics, but truly aligned with the types of questions and problems that students are going to be expected to know and be able to do. So taking that to the next level. And then we also have the work with Hill for Literacy, who's also going to be looking at what may answer some of the question as to why there would be a dip after 3rd grade. So that's one of the suspicions that we have, but we don't have all of the answers yet.
Yeah, I'll talk later on tonight during my memo a little bit about some of these things, but in particular, Kane and I have had several opportunities this fall to do some walkthroughs of Kane and I in 3rd grade in particular, and I just went through did 6th grade. So a piece of it too is looking at many of the things that Jill mentioned, but also pacing, also objectives, formative assessment, providing some feedback to make that consistency, so the things that we see that are really great and the things that we see in 3rd grade, to make those more comprehensive throughout the building.
Yeah, and the other thing that I noticed is that we seem to have a dip in our ELA scores once we started collaborative classroom. And part of me wonders whether or not that curriculum is a detriment to our students, because it may not be matching up to our standards, as you mentioned earlier, nor may their assessments be mirroring what our students are being tested on. So I'm greatly concerned about collaborative classroom and how it could maybe be a huge issue with not even matching science of reading routines. And we've invested a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
That's part of the work that we're doing with Hill, and I'll talk a little bit more about
Perfect.
that too, but I'll definitely cover those pieces for sure.
And like most textbooks, we invest a lot of money, but because they're all online, we're continually having to revisit and subscribe. So it's something
no
that.
longer a one-time fee.
So once our subscription is over, then obviously we'll have to once again re-examine. So the work we do with Hill should inform that decision.
The other question I had in regards to science, and you may get to this as well, with the new MCAS for science, I'm concerned that Mystery Science is not going to meet the needs for our 5th grade learners, having the ability to experiment digitally and analyzing data the way that the new MCAS is written. And I know that we're using OpenSciEd for 6th grade, but where 5th grade is going to be having this digital component of experimenting and analyzing data, I want to make sure that we're able to meet the students' needs, so come spring, when they get this new test, they're not completely shocked.
Yeah, that's a piece of the work that we did on November 5th with Scott Farrell and the group that uses OpenSciEd, and so we did some PD on the 5th around that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
So 5th grade will be included in that?
5th grade was included, as were 3, 4, and 5 around professional development,
Okay.
connected to those things. Yep.
Any other questions? I have questions.
Go for it.
Okay. So you said that you're continuing to differentiate instruction and that you revise the schedule for ELA to include more time. Like, how are those decisions made, like as far as increasing, and what are you replacing when you increase just to make sure that, you know, things are balanced and,
Well, when we're creating the master schedule, we're trying to create blocks of learning so they're not interrupted by whether it be specialist time or their lunch and recess. So we're trying to give grade levels those chunks of time so that they're not interrupted by that. And what we also did is we added win blocks, like what I need blocks for both ELA and math into the master schedule, so that it's not something that can be modified or changed with things in the schedule, because that's when our interventionists are supporting the classrooms at those particular grade levels. And it's like 30-minute blocks for each subject areas.
okay. The other question I have is, how often are the data meetings where you're evaluating the data from?
So we have the data meetings. Once our benchmark data comes out, we have data meetings. Once we have access to all the data, we analyze it, we pull it together, and we schedule. So right now, it's for each subject, it would be one data meeting per benchmark. So it would be, we have the fall, winter, and spring, and then we have math, ELA, and now writing is added into that. So we'll have meetings for each of those subject areas and benchmarks. So it's 3 times for each subject area.
3 times a year?
Yeah,
Okay, so like every few months then you're meeting.
pretty much, yeah.
Then using the MTSS data, and did you say that you took away one of the benchmarks?
From last year, we thought that moving up the timeline for our benchmark throughout the district, we thought that it was going to help us get more data earlier before MCAS time, but we realized that we were outside of the windows for when STAR growth scores come in and with the DIBELS as well. So we ended up doing a 4th benchmark, and it was late. It was almost like in early June. So we didn't get the results that we were hoping for when we had added that 4th benchmark.
Okay, so then my other question is, then how are the needs identified? Like what are, because, you know, these are very high level data that we're presenting. On a student level in a classroom, how do you identify the kids that need the extra support?
So we, based upon those benchmark meetings, those data meetings that we have, so we'll pull those students up, and then we'll figure out when we go through their scores and their growth scores, and we look at them as a team, as a grade level team. We'll talk about like what each of these students are getting. Are they getting any interventions? And then we discuss who's providing those interventions. And because some of them should be tier 1 in the classroom or tier 2 in the classroom, and then some tier 2 and 3 are outside the classroom. On if they were getting supports from special education or possibly Title I. And so then after the plan is devised, then we revisit it, and in 6 to 8 weeks, we kind of do those check-ins on like, are these students making the progress that we're seeing? Because some of those students are targeted in the classroom by the classroom teacher, and some are getting the interventions by possibly a Title I teacher or a special ed teacher or math interventionist or something.
And how are you measuring those benchmarks for those students to see if there's progress?
It would be classroom data, and then when we get our fall to winter benchmarks is what we would use.
Okay, I'm just worried about the amount of time, you know, like, I feel like the teachers really know their students, and are they able to, because, you know, if we wait too long, time has passed.
Right.
And I mean, and is this how you've always done it? Because, I mean, or is this a new way of doing it? Like, is this the practice you've had in the past for your analysis
For
or
tracking students.
Yes.
I mean, Brian and I have been doing it every year. We try and tweak it and make it better each year, but it's pretty much been the process that we've always used, where we have a data room that we kind of track those students, and when we check in with grade levels, we try and see if we're moving the needle, and then marks, then we kind of adjust as necessary.
Were you surprised by the MCAS results after like the STAR data from last year and the data that we had? Were you expecting them? Like, I'm wondering if there's a correlation, like, are the things we're doing working? Because it seems like, I know across the state there's been a decrease, but also, you know, and thankfully we are ahead of the state, it looks like, in a lot of our subjects, but like the SGP for grade 4 and grade 6 was 41% for grade 4 and 42% for grade 6. So like, do we know what, you know, like, I know you guys are doing a lot, like, I totally understand that, but I feel like teachers really know their students and want to make sure that maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure how to say it really, except just to make sure that kids aren't falling through
I
the
would
cracks.
agree with Lauren that we need to be doing more progress monitoring more frequently. I personally would like to see every 6 weeks. So every 6 weeks, we're doing some sort of progress monitoring assessment to see if there's growth, and if there isn't growth, being open and honest with parents even, letting them know where their child stands. Even a report card period could be too long, and a child may have a simple fix, a gap that can be fixed with some tier 2 interventions, either within or outside of the classroom. And I would rather us close that gap earlier rather than waiting and widen that gap till that child is at struggling or frustrational level and no longer open to learning.
I think it's the expectation that we make sure that our teachers are in constant communication with families and letting them know where their day-to-day, performance is in the class. And if they are struggling, then parents definitely want to be communicated with, and that's what we're encouraging our teachers to make sure that they're doing, because we don't want any surprises when the report cards come out, 3 times a year, and it is a long time. It's 12 weeks or so in between from one reporting period to the next, so it is quite some time. But we want to make sure that our teachers are working with the students in the class at tier 1 level as much as humanly possible, and it's not someone else that's going to come in and fix it for them.
No, I
We're
agree.
trying to encourage our teachers, like, they can provide those tier 1 and tier 2 interventions right there in the classroom, and the students don't have to leave the room to be seen by the reading teacher or the math interventionist or Title I or special ed. So a lot of those things can happen right there in the classroom, and that's something that we're trying to encourage our teachers to do more of, be more consistent with it.
So I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Jill, go ahead.
Under the district curriculum accommodation plan, if a child is referred to the support team, if a teacher refers a child to the support team, that support team will monitor their progress for 6 weeks. They will put certain interventions in place and then check back in 6 weeks.
Are parents made aware? I think I've asked that before, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yes. So if a student is brought to our MTSS group, then teachers will fill out a district form, an MTSS referral form for what it is, whether it be academics or behavior or what have you. And then they put all the data on there that they have and the interventions that they've tried. And then we bring it to our MTSS group of 6 to 8 people. And then we review the data that teachers have submitted, and then we kind of brainstorm ways like what's working, what's not, and then we put in, suggest strategies to try out and interventions to put in place, and then 6 to 8 weeks we reconvene the team and see if there's progress that's been made, or do we need to adjust, or we consider, is it something that we should pursue with special education testing.
Do you have data on the success of like the MTSS interventions?
The MTSS is like formal, like this year. This is year 1 of it. So I'd have to look back and see.
I thought you were doing it last year and other years.
Right, before we called it child study, which was a little tweak. The difference that we had this year is that we're meeting twice. We're meeting every week for an hour we meet K to 2 and then we meet 3 to 6, so it meets every week regardless of if there's a student that we're talking with, or if we're just meeting, discussing what's been working, or students that are at risk.
I mean, every grade should have students, right? Because they don't all have kids that are meeting or exceeding expectations.
Absolutely.
Right, but they may not fit into that 6-week cycle.
Okay. Because I would be curious to see the data of the success of the MTSS. Because I feel like that's where we will see whether what you're working in 6 weeks is a lot shorter than your time between benchmarks, and you know, and if the concern is like the trend seems a little bit like scores are going down, so I feel like we need to change that.
Our scores are going,
Well, they're like back and forth. Like if you look through the cohorts, you know, 59 to 46. Actually, yeah, that's going down. Current grade 5. Grade 4, we already know the 3rd grade did great. You know, 59, 44, 46 for current grade 6. I mean, to me that looks like a trend, but I don't, you know, it seems like I mean, I know 2021 was kind of a weird year, so, but like, you know, 22 for the current grade 7 was 41, 57, 55, which that is an improvement there, but if you look at math for our current grade 7, it was 45, 51, and 42, if I'm reading the chart correctly.
right.
So there are, I mean, obviously I'm talking about trends, I'm not talking about every single instance, and that's my concern. So I really want data-driven results on students that are identified that need help, how it's going, and, you know, see improvements and see what, and we used to, you know, just see improvement, basically, more growth.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Because
sorry.
this is more, no, it's okay. This, in my mind, is more of a practicality, and I wonder if this is a factor. Do you have a sense of the number of kids that are in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 interventions? Like, have you seen any trends with the amount of kids needing more or less of those interventions? And then, so this is a multi-part question, if you bear with me. So I'm curious about the number of students, and then are there any trends with how long they're receiving those supports? Do they need them longer? Is there a point in which that they just incorporate that into their learning style and they don't need that additional support? And then kind of bottom line is, do we have enough staff to do this? Because we are being asked to do more with less. And we are heading into budget season, and I respect the fact that, you know, we're asking a lot, and we're looking to see a lot of growth, but I have serious concerns about whether we have the staff in place. And I know we're going to talk about budgets later, but I don't see us gaining staff next year. So that's my concern.
Did you want to?
So, Tier 1 is the instruction that all students get. It's the basic sound teaching practices that we implement to help make sure that all students can access the material. Tier 2 is when these are your smaller groups, the additional support that some students need. And Tier 3 is the more intensive support that, and even in theory, even fewer students should need. In a perfect world, all of these interventions would occur in the general education classroom, because when you pull a student out of the general education classroom, you tend to see the achievement gap widen, not close, because they're missing those grade level expectations oftentimes. A child is not necessarily in a category for a year or even a month. So I could be struggling with a math concept, and so the teacher will pull me into the smaller group. But then in working through the smaller group, perhaps I have what I need, I'm unstuck, and I can go and then work independently. So at any particular time, these numbers can and should be more fluid. It's not like the same type of plan that you would be on for a curriculum accommodation plan or a special education plan. The tiers should be fluid and can change regularly. So it's not as if your reading teachers or your ELA teachers will be able to say, this many students are scoring here in this category, and they're going to need more intensive supports. And they may remain in there until they take that next benchmark assessment to show that they've moved off of it. So there's the day-to-day formative assessments that can occur, but there's also the benchmark assessments that occur to help create.
Some of the things that we've been talking about as far as Tier 1 instruction, in my opinion, improving Tier 1 instruction is really step one. Like that's number one, right? Making sure, like I spoke about a few minutes ago, that the objective is clear, that the lesson is, I do, you do, we do, that there's a gradual release that happens in a lesson, and that there's formative checks that happen in the classroom to make sure that students understand it before we move on, right? We can't just move on if people don't understand, but that's a very dynamic process that when I go around and do rounds, which I've been doing with principals, that we need to give feedback to teachers. It's just, people are doing it, but to what level are they doing it? How often are they doing it? And what happens when children don't understand, right? Somebody might say, well, I've taught that, but be sure that they understand that, right? So if they don't, then we need to reteach it, teach it in a different way, do things, small group, all of those pieces. So that work has been the primary focus in much of my work with Brian and with the principals. Also early, that the benchmark assessments, the STAR and the DIBELS, all happened in September, and that data meetings happened right after that. There was some tightening of that needed to happen in that, right, that the assessments, in my opinion, need to happen very early in the year. It's sort of like getting the baseline. And then from there, the data meetings needed to happen very quickly after that. So district-wide, meaning districts, trying to tighten that up and have it be a little bit tighter right after. And then again, now we're working on the writing piece, which they worked on November 5th. That will happen in the next few weeks. And then we'll do what's called MOY, middle of year. Assessments need to happen again. And so those are the larger screeners, but the formative assessment and the progress monitoring, all of those things should be ongoing throughout the times that are in between the data meetings.
Are we still using Lexia in the classroom?
We do have Lexia, but we have a couple other programs.
The teachers are nodding no. They're saying no.
We have multiple programs. I'm offhand, we have iExcel, Lexia. What else do we have?
It's called the
Lilo and K-2.
Yeah.
But then in 3 through 6, we don't have the Lilo.
I'm just mentioning that because on Lexia, I'm able to, with my students, for instance, see if a student is struggling with a particular concept and do some tier 2 instruction with that student, and even pull students that are around the same, struggles and pull them together in one group. And it's very timely. That's the word I'm looking for. And so I'm able to solve those problems very quickly in sometimes as short as a 10-minute lesson to get corrections made. So if we already have the subscription for Lexia, I would encourage us to use it. It's a great tool for teaching reading, even if students were encouraged to work on it at home if they have a computer.
If I recall correctly, last year Melissa Farrell, because of budget constraints, opted to renew the subscription and from input from teacher groups throughout the multiple districts, decided to go with Lilo for some grades and then Lexia in the other grades. And I believe that there were reasons as to why they chose those two different platforms. But again, that's what we have this year.
Yeah.
We have new leadership, and so again, people love Lexia. Lexia is also very expensive. So again, I think part of the hope was that they might be able to find a tool that did something similar that wasn't as expensive.
Right. Go ahead.
I just want to get back to the question that I asked. So I understand the fluidity of, kids might need, just a small amount of support and get the concept. And so it's hard to track and trend. But, getting back to the staffing, have we seen any challenges, I guess, with having enough support staff in place to help with these interventions?
I mean, there's definitely been challenges. I mean, we lost a lot of staff last year, so the support staff is not what it was compared to last year by any means.
Okay. From teachers, have you gotten any feedback around that, challenges this year in terms of covering those interventions?
I think that's been the challenge. We don't have the number of paraprofessionals that we had. We don't have the number of Title I supports that we had last year. And then same thing with we're down to one reading teacher, and our one reading teacher is on maternity leave right now. So we're definitely feeling the challenges of having less staff than we did last year.
I think it's probably, there's other combination or contributing factors into the scores. But, again, we're getting into the budget season, and I want to just make kind of the community aware that these are some of the repercussions around cutting school budgets, and that, as we get further into the budget process, it's really important for parents specifically, but all taxpayers that vote at town meeting to understand the importance of supporting a school budget that's robust enough to have successful student achievement.
I
Sorry,
would
that's my
agree.
little
I would agree with you, Lori. I mean, one of the notes that I made as you were presenting is, what is our current caseload for our reading teacher? How many students are they taking out for that Tier 2 instruction? And how many students more could they be picking up had we kept that second reading specialist? And so my concern is that students that, the teachers can't do it all. Yes, they can do the Tier 2 instruction in the classroom, but if you've got these huge gaps, my concern is that in grade 6, if you've got students that are reading at a grade 3 level, 4 level, they need far more supports and need that Tier 2 instruction regularly to be able to get closer and closer to filling those gaps. And if we don't have the staffing to help support the teacher, then that's going to become a feat that they may not be able to match.
And that's where I feel like the data is really important, to know the number of students impacted, so we can make budgetary decisions based on that. Because I hear what you're saying about, and the focus last year was preserving Tier 1 instruction, which from what I'm hearing is the most effective way to impact. So if that's the most effective way, then what do we need to do to make that happen? But also knowing what is beyond the scope of Tier 1 instruction. Like I want to know how many students this impacts, because we need to make decisions.
Yeah.
And we have to have the data, so that we can make the best decision for the students for their achievement. So we have to know who's impacted, how many students are here, how many students are here, numbers, hard numbers. So anyway.
No, I mean, I would agree with that, like, maybe for the January meeting, if there's a way of understanding, I know it's fluid, but there's gotta be a way of just, even
Within
ticking,
a
like, we've had this
certain,
many interventions in grade 3, even if they're not, lasting
Like
for
what
multiple.
percentage? Yeah.
Yeah,
Could you break down your star and Dibbles results? Not by individuals, but by number of students in each category?
Yep, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for the presentation. Does anyone have questions?
No.
Thank you for the information. Okay, Sarah?
I shared it with you so that it would have animation. This is the. I emailed it to you. Did I even send you 2 emails? Sorry. Stay tuned.
No worries.
Exit out of this. Go over the ones that we have to go back into the second time. So go into your email. I'm sorry, I have 2 different presentations, but they're not 42 slides each.
Sarah, while he's doing that, do you have cheat codes for all of these numbers at the bottom?
What numbers at the bottom?
The 10, 8, 7, 4, 13, 8, 7, 4. I know that these are types of accounts, correct? On the bottom of,
I'll explain those.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes,
Well, and this is the presentation you gave at the joint meeting, correct?
it's,
Tweak.
part is different,
Okay.
yes.
No, I'm just saying, like, if people, you know,
If you were at the joint meeting and want to snooze through this, I'll wake you up when we get to the.
I'm not saying that, I'm just, you know, I'm sure it's Halifax specific, you know.
Did you mind sending me?
It's preparing, thank you. It's preparing for budget season. Yeah, it's the preparing for the Halifax for people expenditure and net school spending, yeah.
That's it. I'm not going to sit in a very uncomfortable chair. This is a modified presentation that I gave to the joint committee. It starts off with a histogram of per pupil expenditures for FY '22. So the '22 fiscal year is the most recent data that's available. The per pupil expenditure is an after-the-fact calculation. So if you think about how in FY '22, in July of '22, June of '22, the fiscal year ended, fall of '22, school business managers made their reports to the state, to DESE. Then the reports were audited, and then the audits were turned in. So we're already up to '23 by the time everything comes in. So usually the FY '23 data would be out by now, but the FY '24 reports are still in the process of being done and haven't been audited yet. So per pupil expenditure is always going to seem like an old number, but FY '22 is what's available on the DESE website. So if you look at this histogram on the bottom, those are per pupil expenditure amounts. So with the histogram, it divides things up into categories. So the category on the left-hand side is all of the districts that spend between $10,874, and $13,874. And then on the left-hand side of the graph, those are counts, so that's the number of districts. So this is all of the districts in the state. The state refers to them as LEAs, Local Educational Associations. So this is all of the districts in the state, all 401 of them, I think. I think that's the number. So if you take a look at the graph, you can see that most of the districts are centered right around this, the tall peak here between $16,874 and $19,874. That's that, we call it the mode, most frequent in math class. The graph does tail off to the right, so there is a district, that's Provincetown, way over there on the right-hand side. Provincetown skews the data because if you think about them as a district, in 2022 they had 141 students, and those 141 students, for example, 10 of them were kindergartners, 11 were first graders, 14 second graders, and 9 third graders, so they had 4 teachers for those 44 students, so they averaged 11 kids per class. So when you don't have economy of scale, you end up with large numbers like they had. So on this graph, this is Halifax for FY22, Halifax's per pupil expenditure, and I would like to point out this is in district per pupil expenditures. If you go on the DESE Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed website, they give 2 different calculations. This is in district, so this is just everything within the brick and mortar of this building. There is a total calculation that includes in district and out of district, but I thought that this was an important calculation for us to look at. So Halifax for FY22 per pupil expenditure in district was $13,419.56. Kingston, $13,454.02. Plimpton was $15,787.85. Silver Lake was $19,450.33, and the state average was $19,566.95. So this is all of our districts, plural, because we are 4 separate districts. This is where we fell, and this data is available on the DESE website for FY22, 21, 20, going back quite a ways. This is just a list of the numbers I just read to you. I'm not going to read them a second time. This was not part of the presentation to the joint committee. So there were 401 local education associations represented in the spreadsheet by DESE. I took that spreadsheet and I sorted it from least expenditure to highest expenditure. And so this is the school that spends the least amount of money in the state. It's a virtual school. They don't have heat, they don't have electricity costs, they don't pay for custodians because the kids log in online. The second school here, also a virtual school. So they're not really even comparable to us. The next 4 schools you might consider to be comparative schools to us, but then Halifax is their 6th lowest per pupil expenditure in the state for FY22. So I saw this and I'm like, oh my goodness, because I live here. This is my tax dollars that we're talking about here. So I wanted to point that out to you to show you where we're at, and this needs to be part of what you consider as we move into the budget season. Moving on, here's a 10-year comparison. So the red line is the state average, again, going back 10 years for all 401 local educational associations. So that's the state average in red. In yellow is Halifax, green is Kingston, the The orange is Plimpton and the blue is Silver Lake. Here's a per pupil expenditure regional comparison. Again, same data type, but these are all of the communities that touch our 3 towns. So you can see that out of all of the communities that touch our 3 towns, Halifax has the lowest per pupil expenditure.
Sarah, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, I was going to just pause and say, any questions on per pupil expenditure?
Yeah, so, as I look at this, I'm noticing that, we are not a fully regionalized school district.
We are not.
So, Plymouth is spending, they're the top, but that includes K through 12, correct?
Yes.
Is there any, I don't know. Our Silver Lake is the most expensive PPE compared to the other 3 towns, which are just K through 6. So if we were to average the 3 districts, I know this isn't a sound comparison, but I'm just wondering if the reason that we look so low, not necessarily, like if it would translate if we were fully regionalized, like where would we rank? Does that make sense? I'm not articulating this well.
It's okay, because I was a math teacher for 20 years. There is no way in the world you can average 4 numbers that are lower than the state and end up with anything at or above the state.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just like, Carver's at 17, but they're fully, that's K through 12. Like, I just don't know how we're
Like Whitman
spending-
Hanson, is
yeah.
that K through 12 or are the elementary schools separated? Like, are these per pupil expenditures typical for elementary schools? Because all of the elementary schools are lower than the K through 12 districts.
So if you spend a lot of time with the data, which I have, there are patterns. So it does cost more to educate high school students than it does elementary school students. So the Silver Lake per pupil expenditure being more does make sense. It also costs more to educate vocational students. So if you were to go through the whole spreadsheet, you would see clumps of like the regional vocational schools spend much more per pupil than a comprehensive high school like we have, where the vocational is attached to the school. And high schools spend more than elementary schools. We just happen to have an unusual configuration where we're not fully regionalized.
Looking at other towns' budgets, I don't know if you've done this far of a deep dive. Percentage-wise, is the town of Halifax budgeting the same amount as other towns? Like, let's throw a number out there. Let's say that 10% of the town's budget goes towards education.
It's 51%.
51%. Does that match other towns?
That is an interesting question, and I don't know where that metric would be stored. So all of the data that I look to on a regular basis is housed with DESE because it's Department of Education and it's just school department budgets. I don't know if the Department of Revenue, which would have, they're not as big into data as DESE is. So I don't know if they would have some sort of analysis spreadsheet easily available to say, here's the town of Abington, this is what percent of their budget is the fire department, the police department, the library, the school. I can look for that. I've never seen it though.
So anecdotally, you did this function in Middleborough. Middleborough's kind of in the middle here. From a percentage of their school budget. I'm not putting you on the spot, but where do we compare in terms of Middleborough?
Middleborough was at $16,034.50.
Right, I'm sorry, a percentage of their town budget. Are they spending 51%? Or
I don't know off the top of my head what, it's not a calculation that's common
Got it.
for school business managers.
Got
I
it.
can look into it, it'll require research.
Yeah, you got enough on your plate, it's just a question.
Well, and sort
Good
of,
question.
sorry. My other question is looking at the per pupil expenditure, it's been going up, you know, which, I mean, it's hard because I feel like,
Everything costs more.
well, yeah, I mean, everything costs more. We always, you know, last year, even our budget was, I believe, 5% more than the year before. The amount, you know, the same amount of money is buying less, like that's, you know, and even though we've increased as time has gone on, like my sort of thing would be to compare the per pupil expenditure to like test scores, for instance. Like, you know, there was something in 2017 where we had a major dip in the per pupil expenditure. What happened there? Did it impact test scores? Things like that. Because, I mean, I don't want to be all about tests all the time, but it's our measure that we have. You know, it's the thing we have to measure students by. So, I mean, that's something I'm curious about too, because we are increasing as we go along, and we're around Kingston, and I mean, I don't know. So like, and Kingston, you know, gave them everything last year. So, you know, it's just like, where's the bending point? Like, as a committee, I mean, we have the town asking for one thing. We have us sitting here wanting to have the best school we can possibly have. And how do we accomplish that? You know, and what really matters? Like, I guess. I mean, I know you have to spend money. Like, I'm not saying that at all, but it's just, is, you know, this a measure of achievement? Do the kids in the districts that are spend a lot more money achieve higher than our kids? I'm sure in certain towns they do. But, I mean, it's just something I want to know as we're going into budget season, because it's going to be tough, and I don't know.
So I raised that issue last year around budget season when we were making deep cuts, that I didn't feel, although we are a district that has equity in terms of curriculum in the 3 elementary schools, I think it's really challenging when you're cutting staff and cutting enrichment and cutting paras to not see inequities in the education between, you know, the Kingston schools, the Clinton schools, and Halifax. And I, you know, even though Kingston and Halifax right now, our per pupil expenditure is, you know, fairly close. Plimpton is kind of very different. So I think, you know, I know we already talked about full regionalization, but I just want to be really mindful that we, as we make cuts to the budget, are not creating some inequities and for our students that will be realized once they get to the middle school.
Absolutely.
Do you have a way of figuring out what our per pupil expenditure is for this past school year? Because as you stated, this is from '22. Do you have the ability to figure that out? Because if I recall, in '22, we added positions.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have those same positions. And so my concern is using old numbers and using that to inform us. And I understand that DESE is not, you know, timely with that, but do we have a way of calculating that on our own?
I can get you ballpark, actually. To separate out the in-district and out-of-district, I can get you ballpark figures,
We won't hold your feet
but
to
I
the fire with
wouldn't
them.
want to hang
but-
my hat on them.
You're right.
Because the 3,000 row spreadsheet with the 27 tabs goes to DESE, and then they data mine out of it.
Right.
And they say, this is this expense, this is this, these are the number of students off of your Sims reports.
I just think it would be
I can
helpful for our
mimic it.
townspeople to hear that, you know, in actuality, last year when we made these cuts, we're at this per pupil expenditure, rather than going off of a year where we actually did add more teachers instead of removing them.
Yeah, I mean, so theoretically, even though we increased our budget last year, we could be under 13,419.
Well, it depends on how many students we have and how they figure it all
True,
out too.
true.
I mean, has our per pupil expenditure gone up because we've had enrollment decline, I mean, that would make the per pupil, you know what I mean, like,
Well, that's why I think
Yeah.
the average for the state is
Yeah.
important, that red line there.
Yeah.
That's pretty much, if you think about groceries, this is like the cost of a tube of toothpaste over years. It goes
Yeah.
up, it goes up, it goes up, so that's a good comparison.
so here's my question too. So I've been on school committee for a few years now, nobody's, that I can recall, has shown the per pupil, have they? I don't know, maybe I didn't, like, I'm just
No,
wondering.
Sarah
Yeah.
and I had a conversation one day, I don't even remember how it came up, and we were talking about different ways that we can tell the story, because we continually hear about how it's X percent of the local budget and this and that. So we wanted to take a look at how we compared, how we fared with other per pupil expenditures. What I can tell you is that schools are oftentimes the biggest expense in a community. It is oftentimes, and it's not a revenue source. So that's not something that, regardless of where I have worked as a teacher or as an administrator, that was true in each of the districts I worked for. We don't have a place where we can mine that data, but again, I think unless you worked in a community with some pretty big departments, most communities
Their
like
biggest
this,
expense is
the
school.
school tends to be the biggest expense of the community.
And it's a requirement. Like,
Yes.
That's part of living in a municipal town, in a community, like, you are required to provide an education for your students. So, in my opinion, it's appropriate that it's the biggest expenditure, no matter what the
Well,
size of the
it
town.
employs the most people in our
Correct.
town, like, no, I mean, it all makes sense, it's just having this data being presented and understanding that, I guess my question is, what are you trying to tell the school committee? What do you
So-
want us to understand from
So
this?
we're going into an interesting budget year, and I need for you to understand all the pieces of the budget as best as possible. This is just one piece leading us up to the budget. The other piece, Lori, you talked about the 3 different individual communities, and we tend to lump ourselves together with the other 2 communities, but Halifax, our tax base is residential. Plimpton has Cisco, so they have residential and commercial, significant commercial. And then Kingston is a very different, just how the taxes come in. So the only, if you go on Halifax Locals, you see the conversations, my taxes are blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
When I lived elsewhere, I got this service, this service, this service, this service. I personally chose to move here because I wanted the sweet little farming community, and my taxes are outrageous, and that's the price I pay for my sweet little farming community. Sometimes there's the goats and the pigs out in the road. I didn't get that in Weymouth.
Yeah, and I think, we're all, we hear all the noise.
Yeah,
So,
no,
I
I mean,
think-
it's like,
I think it's important for the story to be told. There's only 2 teachers sitting in the audience tonight, but hopefully people will take some time to look at these videos that we make available, or maybe there's some people even watching now. I'm sure we're gonna hear about it when we pass the budget. But if we can explain I said it last year when we were trying to pass the budget, people need to support education in this town.
no, you're right, and this information's important, I just am trying to understand the whole picture as well.
So the next piece that I want to talk about is net school spending, because that's another piece that we need to completely understand for the budgeting process. Net school spending is the actual amount of money spent towards operating costs for a public school district relative to what's called the foundation budget. And this funding requirement is one of the major differences between a school department and every other department in town. No other municipal department has a specific funding requirement, due in large part to the fact that no other municipal department's service is guaranteed by the state constitution. The school department also tends to be the largest portion of the municipality's budget. So I think that's what you were referring to earlier. It's required for us to have a school district. So there are three components to the foundation. If you think foundation budget, the foundation of your house is what the house is built on. The foundation budget is what your budget is built on. Foundation budget is a statistical measure that represents the minimum amount of money a school district in Massachusetts needs to spend to provide an adequate education for its students. This is calculated for districts representing minimum spending needed and adjusted annually to reflect changes in enrollment, demographics, inflation, and geographical wage differences. There's two parts: the local contribution or local appropriation required to meet net school spending, and then Chapter 78. Chapter 78 is from the state. It's part of the 1993 Education Reform Act. Has the state giving Chapter 78 to the towns. So the local contribution plus Chapter 78 is the foundation budget. The foundation budget will come out in January, and then net school spending is shown as a percent of what's required. So this graph here, across the bottom, are percentages. So the bar on the left-hand side is less than 100%. That's two school districts where the state said you must spend this amount to have an adequate budget, and they spent less than that amount, less than 100%. So the state average is 127%, 127.4%. So the expectation is that a town will spend more than the absolute bare minimum. So if you take a look at the...
Is 100% the bare minimum?
100% is the bare minimum.
Okay, thank you.
So there were a couple districts that spent, and this is the FY24, I forgot to mention this. This is the FY24 data, which came off of the FY23 end of year reports. So when you file the end of year report for the previous year, you give the budget information for the next year. And so this comes from the budget information from those 401 school districts from our last graph.
Can we get a history of the percent of foundation for the last few years?
I can get that to you, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this illustrates pretty, Plimpton's 149%.
They have
Halifax
very
is
few
116.
students too.
I know.
No, I'm not saying, I know, I get it, I'm just trying to understand the data.
So then, again, it's a histogram, percentages across the bottom. You do have some outliers on the far right-hand side. Hello, Provincetown, on the far right. And then the bulk of the state is in the 100 to 125% range. So here's Halifax.
And we're in the mid-range of where the bulk of the state is.
Yes.
Okay.
So Halifax at 116.3%, Kingston at 117.8%, Silver Lake 120.2%, the state average is 127.4%, and Plimpton at 149.7%. And again, here's a regional comparison. So we shifted up a little bit in the regional comparison, ahead of Bridgewater, Raynham, and East Bridgewater. So, any questions about net school spending?
No. I don't have anything, guys.
No. Okay. Then I'm gonna get off of this presentation and move to my other one.
Thank you.
So at a previous meeting, the topic of charging bus fees came up. I did an analysis, basically started with state law. State law on the left-hand side, summary on the right-hand side. We must provide free transportation to children in grades K to 6 who reside more than 2 miles from their school of attendance. We can charge fees, but not to those children who qualify for free or reduced price meals. So everybody beyond 2 miles. So once I had this information about the law, I had a conversation with the bus company. They sent me a spreadsheet with the home to school distances, and I went through the spreadsheet. The picture on the right is not to scale. I need you to know that I just put circles there for reference because I think it's important for you to understand sort of that the distance home to school beyond 2 miles. You know, I live down here near Orchard Circle where a couple of the houses are within 2 miles, but most of the houses in the neighborhood are beyond 2 miles.
That's what I was thinking, like if the bus is in the neighborhood, what do you do then, right? Be like, okay, you can't get on the bus, like.
That would be something for the school committee to decide if you wanted to impart fees of how you would divide up the weird neighborhoods.
Are these driving miles or as the crow flies?
These are defined as, if you imagine the end of your driveway along the commonly traveled route, which would be the street, to the front door of the building.
Gotcha.
So essentially door to door. But it's, you know, if you have a 6 mile long driveway, it's from the end of your driveway.
So what's the difference between, why are students ineligible, like the 18 within a month?
So if you start at the top, there's 61 students that live within 1 mile of the school, 142 that live within, between 1 and 2 miles, and 318 beyond 2 miles. So we have to transport those 318 kids with no fees at state law.
Okay.
The ineligible are the students that qualify for free or reduced lunch. So out of that 61 students within 1 mile, 18 of them could not be charged a fee. Out of the 142 students between 1 and 2 miles, 34 of them could not be charged a fee. And then again, the whole 318 would not be eligible to be charged a fee because of distance.
Hold on, sorry, 1 second. So basically, the amount of students we could charge is about 151, according to, like, I know it's not, like, but about 150 students of the total number of students in our school.
Yes.
Okay.
And I put together a price comparison using the 1 mile and the between 1 and 2 miles because I thought it would be interesting for you to look at.
For sure.
So if you take a look at this grid on the left-hand side with the potential fee, I just put 4 different amounts there, $250, $500, $750, and $1,000 for charging, and then across the top, participation fee. So if you charged the students within, the families within 1 mile of the school, $250 per student, and everybody said, yes, we want to do this, that would be $10,750. If it were me and I lived within the mile of the school and you were going to charge me, I would be walking my kid to school. So I wanted to keep this amount separate just so you could see that as the price goes up, I imagine the walkers to school would increase.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if we were to adopt something like this, and I'm not advocating for or against at this point, but to your theory, there's a high potential that parents would be like, that's too much, I'm just gonna drive or drop them off or they'll walk. Do we if that is the case, if we have parent, like, can we make decisions around our number of buses?
Or do you still have to have the number of buses in order, because like I know the concerns people had last year was, like, what, is there any possible actual savings is like, I guess, is the bottom
Yeah,
line,
I mean,
because
like, can we reduce our buses again if we have people that are
Because you-
opting to drive their kids, or do we still have to provide the same number of buses?
is there
um,
still that you have to be able to, like, in an emergency, bus the whole school out?
We have 31 shared buses across 3 towns in the regional school district. And the 2 buses that Halifax gave up last year are now 2 buses in Kingston because they had
Increase.
buses they were paying for beyond the shared buses.
Oh.
So
Back
I guess the
to
question is, can we cut another bus if that were to happen?
So back to this.
Yeah,
So, and you can look through this at your leisure, but just kind of think of, as the price goes up, the participation rate will probably go down. This is the group, the within 1 mile group. This is the between 1 and 2 mile group, where, again, as the price goes up, your participation rate is going to go down, but probably not the same as the within 1 mile. Because when we say 1.5 miles, we're talking about like Cranberry Drive. I don't even know if there's sidewalks between Cranberry and Stony Ware. Couldn't think of the name. So this is something for you to think about as we move forward. So in summary, you can have a bus fee if you like, but it's only for certain riders within 2 miles of the school. If we were to decide to do this, we would need to put an article on spring town meeting in order to create a revolving account to put the fees into, to then have them be accessible. So then, how does this work with the budget? We wouldn't know by the time the budget needs to be voted and then voted by town meeting, we wouldn't know what type of revenue would come in and who would be riding the bus and who wouldn't be riding the bus. And so we couldn't count, in my opinion, we couldn't count on removing another bus.
yeah.
But we could, if we don't have the ridership in August, reduce a bus.
Which is not terribly helpful, because we've already done the budget. But my other question is, do you know what typically towns charge to ride the bus? Do you have a?
I can ask my listserv group
Thank you.
for that information. I don't
'Cause
know.
that also would impact whether it's actually worthwhile instead of just annoying. Like if, I don't know.
Do we know how many students who live within that 1 and 2 mile radius are already being driven by parents?
I don't know. This is, so the information that I got from the bus company was for every student that's currently on the bus.
But if a parent had an issue and couldn't pick up their child, that child could ride the bus, correct?
Yes.
So are they calculating all students that could or are actually taking the bus?
They routed, it's the students they've routed for that they have a seat for, are included in that number I had.
I understand that, but
But
for
we don't
instance,
have, we don't have a way of predicting. We don't track, like, who are the kids that are getting picked
Right,
up and dropped off. We
that's
don't-
my question, because I know when my kids were going to Silver Lake, they had a bus seat secure for them, but most days they were driven to and driven home because
Yes.
of before and after school activities.
Mhm.
But there were occasions where they did ride the bus. And I think if we already know that we have a very large amount of parents who live within those radiuses driving, and although they have a seat secure for their child on the bus, but are already driving them, that, I think that's information that can help inform our decision.
Well, there's how many drivers do you have, Mr. Baudry?
70-ish.
And obviously there's multiple students. It's not
Yeah.
just one kid in each car, so.
I mean, my gut on this is that no matter what decision we make, it's gonna be a tough thing. There was a lot of, concern from parents. Cutting the two buses, it seems like it's working, based on the feedback that we've heard. So, it's hard to look in a crystal ball and understand like what makes the most sense if we were to put this out there. But I think we would need to get some feedback from parents before we go too deep into this. That's my only concern. I feel like they should have a right to know this is on the table before we start really building traction towards putting it together. We're going to talk about budget, so like if this is one of the things we're looking at, then I think it should be put in like a whole host of things that we're looking at.
Absolutely.
That the number of people that can participate and the amount of revenue we could actually get from it is extremely telling.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that any school charges more than $250.
Right.
I don't know though, but I can't imagine anyone, anyway, well, it's a discussion for another time, but I can't imagine charging more than that, But that's just my personal opinion.
I think it'll be difficult too if like the majority of our students live 3 miles an hour.
Right.
And you're only asking, a small segment of the population, like that's just gonna be a difficult sell.
151 students impacts a very small percentage of the school.
And so, back to what I was saying, of this 151, how many are already driving their kid? And so the impact could be even much smaller.
What's the current enrollment, Mr. Baudry?
I have 33.
Oh, wow, that went down. So 28% of the school would be impacted by this. Okay, that was helpful, thank you.
Yeah, very helpful.
You're welcome. I'm going to try to be quick on the rest of my stuff. Financial report, the financial report is in your folder. If you scroll down the column, the budget balance column, you'll see there are some numbers that are negative numbers. So the first one right off the bat, you can see I've created a contractual services school committee line. So these are fees that were lumped in inappropriately in other lines. I'm in the process of trying to move things to where they belong. So that's your Mass Association of School Committees, online policy manual, and ARC-SED, which is our tool for contract negotiations. The insurance for the Union 31 School Committee was $510 over what was budgeted. There's no wiggle room on that. And then all of the other negative numbers are because I'm moving things around so for example, if you look at special ed lines, you might see some numbers that are negative that you would be very concerned about. A lot of those are due to the fact that for example, we have a one-to-one nurse, and I've created a contractual service nursing line for that. So if you look at those, don't be overly concerned. The special ed department provided me with a summary of where we're at right now for the year, and the special ed accounts total are there's an excess of $126,000 at the moment. And I'll update you on that as the year progresses. Any questions about the financial report?
If we get to a point where we need to freeze the budget, I imagine we'll.
Let you
Okay.
know.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are we close to that or no?
No.
That's good.
That is good, I mean, to know,
Can I ask my question about?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So at our last meeting, we talked about the boiler, maintenance, and you were gonna ask for a placeholder on the town warrant.
So I have two other things I want to talk
Oh,
about.
sorry.
I'm sorry. So in your folder is a revised end-of-year closeout. So if you recall, we had some expenses that came in after the end of, after our closeout meeting on July 1st. And those expenses were going to go to town meeting to be paid. I had a conversation with the town manager. They hadn't finished closing out the fiscal year, and they asked me to just send those bills. So we did a FY24 warrant in October. So if you look at the revised closeout, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 4 invoices that were processed and paid by the town. That reduced the grand total of what's being turned back over to the town to now $100,175.04. Which brings me to the boilers. So there was an issue with the boilers, and I can't recall off the top of my head because it's way past my bedtime, but I think it was 1 or 2 boilers. There was an issue with the boilers. Kane, how many?
I got that here.
3. 3 boilers.
We have 3, but 2 of them were giving us problems.
So out of the 3 boilers, 2 were giving problems, 2 were covered under warranty and replaced. And that has been paid for out of the FY25 school budget, and the town will be transferring money to the school at town meeting out of this excess.
Okay,
In the spring?
In
No,
December?
Okay.
okay.
How much was the total? Okay.
Good question, sorry. I wasn't prepared to talk about boilers tonight.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Nonetheless, it's been fixed and there's no issues with the boilers, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's it for the financial report, actually.
Speaking of money and other issues that we've dealt with, the water situation, are we still having expenditures in regards to that, or are we done with that situation?
So the last testing that was done, there were no issues. There are filters on the water fountains. There are filters on certain
Filters.
kitchen equipment, and they have since been retested, and those are all checking out, so,
And no more Poland Springs then?
no
Nope.
more Poles and Springs.
Is there any way that we can see like a total cost, all from last year, this year, that encompasses this whole water situation? Like, in the end, what did we end up having to spend because of this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So that's it for the financial report. If you take a look, next on the agenda is the grant awards. So we are recipients of federal grants, federal entitlement grants. In previous years, the Silver Lake had acted as a consortium lead, and so all the money went to Silver Lake and then was spent out. And one of the changes that we've made, which Desi has said thank you for, because they're going to do this with all of their grants, is the grants will be belonging to each town separate. To Halifax, we need to accept the grant award, so I put in your digital folder a screenshot of the state and federal entitlement and allocation grants by district. So here's the Halifax grants. What I will tell you about this is the first one on the list, the $7,075, that early childhood 262 grant is actually for the pre-K, which is Silver Lake. So DESI has moved that money to Silver Lake. So that $7,075 is not a Halifax grant amount. The 240 grant, the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, Halifax is due $185,843. Title I, Halifax will receive $56,401. Title II, $9,930. Title IV, $10,000, for a district total of $262,174.
I'd like to make a motion to accept these federal and state entitlement and allocation grants for the town of Halifax, totaling in the amount of $262,174.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, a vote, all in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Yep.
I have a quick question for you, Sarah, in regards to these state entitlements and allocations. The town of Halifax is going to be taking a vote in the month of December in regards to the MBTA housing. And we have been told that the state has threatened to pull some state funds. Are these funds, by any chance, part of those funds that our governor is planning on threatening to pull from the town should we decide as a town not to be an MBTA supporter or supporter of the housing?
So I know it says at the top of the page, state and federal entitlement, but these are federal grants. So all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them here are federal
And are there
grants.
any other funds that we are receiving from the state that we are possibly going to lose because of a nay vote that would affect the schools and the school budget?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I will research that and send it out. There are very few grants that were Halifax grants. And so,
So they're primarily regional?
yes.
Okay.
So how does that work if it's a regional grant? Are we putting Silver Lake in jeopardy if this town is not in compliance? Because I think Kingston voted to.
They did vote to
They
support
did,
it.
right. I don't know what the status with Plumpton is, but they don't have a.
They don't, I don't think
So they're
they're
not,
they're
yeah,
part
sorry.
of this.
State grants are not, so where we would see state grants would be competitive grants. So back during COVID and recovery from COVID times, there were a lot of state grants available for summer school programs, for after-school programs, for but you had to apply for them as part of a competitive process, and you may or may not have been awarded them. These grants here go from the U.S. Treasury through DESI to us, and it's not like they're going to say, no, you can't have this money.
Right.
So I need to look into the answer for that, about whether it's the DESI, any DESI type state grants, or whether it's like the road repairs and things like that that the state gives towns.
If we can get clarity too, in terms of if we vote no on this, if we put any Silver Lake specific state funding, state grants in jeopardy, because I think that's important. think we just need to be transparent with the community.
There's been a lot of chatter about how having more housing in the town of Halifax will increase the student population in our school. But I also, while that is a very valid concern, I am also concerned that we could lose money that would greatly impact our students that we currently have.
Okay. Is that everything, Sarah?
It is, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Clifford?
I have a few things from my curriculum and instruction assessment update. The first piece is to review briefly the Professional Development Day that happened on November 5th. All 4 districts participated in the PD Day. This is an overview of what happened that day. So K through 2 teachers throughout the 3 districts participated in a full day of PD provided by the Stern Center, which was entitled Introduction to Structured Literacy. This workshop was held virtually as educators remained at their own schools during this workshop. The topics during this workshop included understanding the major theoretical underpinnings of the science of reading, which included discussing the reading rope and the reading brain. We also discussed understanding that oral language and speech is natural, but reading and writing is not. Also, there was a discussion of phonemic awareness, orthographic mapping. In the afternoon, educators were able to explore videos and resources that can be used in instructional planning, and they were able to connect the learning that occurred during the workshop session by using templates for practicing phonics skills and reading text, along with fluency and comprehension. So that is what the K through 2 teachers worked on during the 5th. Grades 3 through 6 teachers focused in the morning on response to reading through writing. Grade level teams reviewed the writing benchwork schedule and how it relates to the scope and sequence of grade level teaching. They participated in MCAS essay analysis. Each grade level analyzed their essay scores from the last 3 years. They had access to grade level MCAS essay prompts to conclude what types of prompts each grade should be supplementing into their reading and writing instruction. Educators discussed how they could embed response to reading through essay, writing, and ELA, and how they could embed grammar and convention skills as well. In the afternoon, educators within their grade level department could focus their work on prevalent topics and issues they were experiencing. This included specific content area work in math, and in particular in science, technology, and engineering. Teachers who specifically teach STE at the grades 3 through 6 level were able to dive into STE DESE expectations under the guidance of Scott Farrell, the 7 through 12 STE curriculum coordinator. The 6th grade STE teachers were able to also focus on the implementation of the Open SciEd curriculum, which we spoke about a little question about that earlier. So they were really able to focus on the DESE standards and new performance tasks that are going to be required, but also the grade 6 teachers were able to discuss the Open SciEd curriculum more with a group from the middle school that's had a lot more experience with this. And also keep in mind that this year we're implementing a curriculum review cycle for all the districts, for all the areas. We start with math, and Kane spoke about this earlier, with the math group starting this year. And the science group will follow. So that's something that we're looking at, looking at math now, science, and making sure that the curriculum we use, K through 6, is aligned with the state standards. So that's something that we've been talking about. K through 6, art, music, PE, library, technology, nurses and guidance faculty met in department meetings during the day and were able to connect with their 7 through 12 counterparts to share lesson planning and design along with discussions of vertical alignment. So I think that was a good experience for those folks to connect with their colleagues at the 7 through 12 level. Special education teachers focused on the new IEP and uploading these to EdPlan. Paraprofessionals were invited to a professional development offering at KES that included information on best practices and related to practical behavior strategies. They worked that day, at KES on, as I mentioned, practical behavior strategies, but also brain science and how this impacts behavior. And in the afternoon, they worked on differentiated teaching techniques and how they could support that in the classroom. At the 7 through 12 level, educators met in departments and continued the work of September 3rd in relation to MCAS data analysis in math, ELA, and STE, along with curriculum work in other departments, which was a continuation of the September 3rd PD day work. They also participated in breakout sessions, which included a menu of training provided by faculty. A sampling of the sessions provided included cyber training, grading, looking at grading, 504 training, STAR training, and AI use in the classroom. So those are some of the things that they worked on. So that was November 5th. And as I spoke previously about the literacy needs assessment, the district is participating in a K-12 literacy needs assessment. We're conducting this assessment to discover where we are as a district in regard to literacy and future implementations of teaching and learning related to literacy. The Hill, which is the consulting group we're working with, has met several times with what we call the district administrative team. That's myself and other administrators. And as an outcome from that group, we formed a larger group that has more representative members to it, which is called the District Literacy Leadership Team. And on November 5th, at the end of our PD in all of the districts, we were able to have a Zoom presentation by Darcy Burns, who's the Executive Director for Hill, where she explained to all educators within the district what the literacy needs assessment would include. This was a great opportunity to have everybody all together in all of the districts, hearing directly from Darcy as to what the needs assessment would entail, what their role would be, and sort of what the outcome of that would be. So I felt like that was a good time to have everybody hear the same thing from Darcy, which was helpful. There are basically 3 components to the needs assessment. The first are focus groups that are happening in all 4 districts, where teachers are formed in small groups with a schedule as to when they meet, and the Hill is asking them questions and taking their information. They've met with the leadership group. They met with us the other day. They're going to meet with us in December, where they asked us questions. The second piece is they're going to provide surveys for people to answer specific questions about literacy throughout the district. And the last piece is our inventories, where they're going to say, what are the assessments you're using, and kind of get all of that information. These components are all in progress currently. After the information is gathered, the Hill will present their findings / report. From there, the DLLT will meet to form a literacy plan for Silver Lake Regional School District and Superintendency Union 31. So that will be the outcome of those pieces. The last piece, we spoke about this earlier too, the data meetings at all the 6 schools in regards to English, language arts, and math, including MCAS information and STAR data, have been completed. The information that was reviewed this fall is from the STAR and DIBBLE assessments that were conducted during late January and February. Students will be assessed again. Educators will again participate in data meetings to help inform instruction and to also inform tiered interventions, which we spoke about. So that's also a piece that I work with Brian DeSantis on at the K-6 level, and the principals, to make sure, like I said, that those are happening in a timely manner and the data meeting follow-ups are happening. And for me, it's twofold in many ways. It's one, to inform instruction, which is around all things related to teaching and learning, but also to help inform the tiered intervention piece that needs to happen. And then upcoming, I mentioned the Math Curriculum Review Steering Committee. They've met once, and now we're forming two subgroups from that committee, one of which will be the K-6 group that will look at doing a core program review for math, and that will stretch from now until probably the end of the year. Brian and I are working very closely on how to set that group up and how to make sure that we do a thorough core review. And then also analyzing teaching for student results. This is a course that is run by RBT, but is for mainly our evaluators to learn more about data-driven instructional practices, because one of the very, very important pieces to being an administrator, being a leader, is being able to do supervision and evaluation at a high level to provide feedback and to move things forward. Evaluation Working Group is another group that I know was established in the district. I've met with Steve Blett, who was a member of that last year, and we're looking to get that group back together in January. And the last piece is the Technology Committee. We met for the first time. Dave Murphy and also Steve Blett are members of that group, among other people. So we started looking at things related to technology. That's
Any questions?
the highlights.
Thank you.
I do, actually. I noticed that your Science of Reading PD was only for K to 2. Do you have a plan to roll that out for those in 3 to 6? Because if they're doing true Tier 2 instruction, they also need this PD.
Yeah, that's something that we're looking at, and also, I think will come out of the results of the needs assessment, more of a pervasive approach to that throughout the levels. I do think that oftentimes when we're talking about specific phonics instruction or science of reading, having a good foundation that's consistent throughout all of the districts is really the primary piece, but for sure, I think that will come out of the needs assessment to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the older students that need.
And what we're using for phonics instruction is OG right now?
It's a combination of things. It is Orton Gillingham, it's Classroom OG. That's a piece where there are different schools in the district that have had that professional development, and there are other schools that necessarily haven't had that as thoroughly. So that's something that I want to address next year, especially at the end of June, where Stern provides a course for Classroom OG, and then also during the school year next year. So that's something we're working on to make sure that that's more comprehensive, because that's not necessarily the case throughout all the 3 elementary schools, that everyone has had the Classroom OG that piece. So that's sort of like step 1.
Mm-hmm.
In different districts, they use Hegarty. Here at HES, I'm not sure the extent that they use Hegarty, but I know that they use it at some of the other schools. But the main piece is really the Classroom OG, and making sure that they have that. Also making sure that the tiered intervention piece is stronger. And also another piece I'd like to look at and collaborate with Chris on is making sure that special needs teachers have the associate's level OG.
Is there a possibility of creating a data bank for our teachers so that they can easily go to a drive and get lessons and decodables that are suitable for the students sitting in front of them at a minute's notice without having to dig through a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think we could get more collaboration and more consistency. That's really been the focus of the work that Brian and I have been doing for sure, is to make sure there's more of a comprehensive approach at all of the schools, because as we know, they all end up in 7th grade together.
That's
We
right.
want to make sure they have the skills that they all need to be in the right place. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Dr.
Yep,
Cruz?
Sarah has-
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I have to answer the question about the vote,
Thank you.
the MBTA vote. I've put 2 documents in the folder for the meeting for tonight. One of them is a community advisory letter from the Attorney General, and one of them is the law, the Section 3A law itself. The advisory from the Attorney General says non-compliant MBTA communities are also subject to the administrative consequence of being rendered ineligible to receive certain forms of state funding. There's a helpful footnote on this in the Attorney General's office that says this references Part B of the law. Part B of the law says an MBTA community that fails to comply with this section shall not be eligible for funds from the Housing Choice Initiative as described by the Governor in a message to the General Court dated December 11, 2017, the Local Capital Projects Fund established in Section 2 I know there's 4 E's, I don't know how many I said, of Chapter 29, the Mass Works Infrastructure Program established in Section 63 of Chapter 23A, or the Housing Works Infrastructure Program established in Section 27 of Chapter 23B. I don't see.
Yeah, those are
Perfect.
non-educational. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
I don't know if they can change things after the vote is taken, but this is what is for right now. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
No, thank you for getting the
It's
answer.
helpful. Great. Dr. Fruit?
So the last item for tonight is a FY26 budget memo from the town administrator, Cody Haddad, and he sent this out to all town departments. We're being asked to submit 2 budgets. The first is a level service budget, and the second should represent a 10% reduction from your total FY25 approved budget. So this includes all aspects of your departmental budget, such as wages, expenses, allocated, etc. So I wanted to share this with you because I know that we had spoken in our last meeting about what you'd like to see from a budget presentation. I put this in here because you also needed to know what the town is looking for and what kind of an impact that 10% of the budget would have on the Halifax Elementary School. So we have been meeting with our principals, and in fact, today we finished with our last principal meeting for the first round of principal meetings, and then we'll meet again prior to our first preliminary budget presentation, where we're going to look at where we are with all of the requests versus where the school committee asked us to be versus the presentations that the town is looking for. And so our goal will be for the preliminary to have all of that information for you to consider in that presentation. And that's where we stand.
So this deadline is December 13th, which is before we meet.
So again, we had met with the town administrators and explained that the school budgets are on a different timeline and are regulated by state law, and we need at least until January to prepare a preliminary, and then the school committees have the opportunity to review those and vote a budget. So the school committees will be following the regulations that pertain to the school committees, and we will honor the town's request by preparing them the information that they request, but we will not have that information by December.
Okay. So this was sent out to all the department heads, and this pertains specifically to Halifax. But is Halifax also looking for a 10% reduction for Silver Lake?
That has not been asked of us. We had a joint meeting scheduled, I think, for December 12th, but that was canceled today by the town administrators. I received a notice from the Plimpton town administrator asking to please cancel and to postpone it, that they would prefer to meet in January.
Okay, some concerns about 10%.
I have a lot of concerns about 10%, because we cut far more than we were asked to cut last time. And to be asked to cut even more, I think
To be
our
fair,
children deserve better.
To be fair, this is to all the department heads for Halifax. This isn't just specific to the school, or am I misreading that?
No, it was to everyone.
It was
Yeah.
to everyone,
But I
but
think
I
that
feel
we
that
do
we
need
went
to
above and
really-
beyond.
I agree. However, I think we need to give a realistic view of what 10% would look like at the school.
Absolutely.
So we need to have a very definitive picture of this is what it will look like. And, you know, go to the town and see if
Yeah.
that's
Do
what
we
they're
have
okay with.
estimates of what kindergarten's gonna look like yet for next year? We have no idea, huh?
I think the information Sarah provided tonight around the foundational minimum and the per pupil expenditure is helpful in kind of illustrating how low, for lack of a better word, Halifax already is. It would be more helpful if we had something that was more current. I know that's crystal ball ask, but I think if we had those types of numbers before town meeting, that would be helpful. Certainly before January, but yeah, I'm not inclined. I think we're gonna have to talk with our town administrator at some point and our board of selectmen. I just don't think it's fair to ask that of our school committee or of our schools.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, future dates, November 28th and 29th is Thanksgiving recess. We have a joint meeting on December 12th.
Canceled.
Oh, that's canceled. Thank you. I didn't know we were still having the, okay. December 23rd, holiday vacation begins. January 2nd, the schools reopen. Our next meeting is January 13th, 2024. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we'll do a call vote. Katie?
Yep.
Lori?
Yep.
Myself is yes. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, please.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.